I am here to talk a little bit more about the Rare Disease Congressional Caucus. I'm going to talk about three specific areas that I think we all tend to focus on. I think the third may be the most important, so I'll save it for last. The first thing that we all work together on is on specific legislative asks and proposals and bills. You've heard some of my colleagues here talk about some of their bills. I know from my boss has worked with a lot of you in the room and the foundation here on the 21st Century Cures Act. We're currently trying to get the Benefit Act through Congress. We'd actually passed the Senate earlier this, I guess last summer, and we're trying to get it through the House. And so, there's a range of members of the Rare Disease Congressional Caucus, and some of whom have slightly different priorities, but I think it's good for us to be able to sort of be an umbrella and make sure that we're pushing for these bills from the sort of caucus perspective, and making sure that the attention stays on them. The second sort of major area that we focus on, I think, I would sort of describe as sort of broader priorities that are particularly important to the rare disease community. I think one that won't surprise you at all is trying to increase NIH funding, medical research funding more generally. Obviously, that can provide huge benefits to the rare disease community. I think in the panel before us, using the examples that they had, but across the board, and obviously 21st Century Cures had a ton of research money, but that we're continuing to push and push and push on that issue because it's so important over the long term to make sure we have a baseline of medical research. Another sort of broad policy issue that I think is important to all of us is making sure patients can access these treatments once they become available. And I think the question earlier and a few others is about making sure that patients can afford these treatments. We want to support innovation and affordability. So I know my boss, for example, I think we have 6 bills to make sure that drugs are affordable to patients. A number of these things are bipartisan, and I think that that's a theme that you see throughout the Rare Disease Caucus, is that it's a very bipartisan issue, that it doesn't really, there's no party for making advances in rare disease treatment. And then the third thing that I think we focus on, and I think it is the most important, is sharing knowledge and your stories. So I see the Minnesota table here and my friend Paul Fogelberg here. And I think that, you may hear this over and over, but I think it is worth reiterating that a lot of what happens on Capitol Hill happens because it resonates with someone, it has an impact. And so with all of you coming and meeting with, us and our colleagues, it doesn't just arm us with information and knowledge, which I think is incredibly important, but it arms us with a story, and it arms us with an example that when we talk to our colleagues about, trying to get this or that into the latest bill, the budget agreement, or something along those lines, you could say, this is what I'm hearing in Minnesota. This is the type of person that it's going to be impacted. And a lot of times, everyone has their information, their facts, their arguments, but I think it would be surprising to many people how often that just story that resonates with a staffer or a member of Congress can make such a big difference. And so we take that very seriously, and in the caucus we're constantly trying to make sure that we're hearing more and more from patients, that we are engaging patients, that the executive branch is hearing from patients, and that we're sharing knowledge. And so we throughout the year often have briefings and other meetings to make sure that we're up to date on the latest information. But I do think that it's hard to overstate how important each of your stories is. And so I do encourage you that when you are in your meetings tomorrow and this week and throughout your advocacy on these issues, it's important to have specific asks about each bill and things like that. But please don't shy away from sort of conveying how important this is to you and your family and your loved ones, and what it will mean or what it has meant, because I think that ultimately that often makes the biggest impact. So thank you. I look forward to your questions as well.